Iran signs 21 cooperation agreements with African countries. Wrapping up a three-nation trip to the continent, Iranian President Ebrahim Raisi confirms more than $2 billion in trade for this year.
Iran has roughly 5 million people from Afghanistan.
Iran just pulled off a massive move. Its exports to Africa jumped by 85% in just one quarter. While the world's attention is elsewhere, Tehran is quietly expanding its influence across 32 African countries. What sparked this explosive growth? How is Iran reshaping trade with Africa? And what does it mean for the global economy? Let's dive into the numbers and the strategy behind this remarkable surge. Chapter 1. The shocking export surge. Let's start with a jaw-dropping number that's been flying under most people's radar. Iran's exports to Africa skyrocketed by 85% in just the first quarter of 2025 compared to the same period the previous year. That's not just a statistic, it's a seismic shift, nearly doubling exports in a matter of months. If you think that's impressive, the story doesn't stop there. Iran has expanded its market outreach from 27 to 32 African countries. The impact is crystal clear in the trade balance too. According to ICE Tehran, Iran's trade surplus with Africa soared by 113%, showing that not only is Iran exporting more, but it's also earning far more than it's importing from the continent. If you're wondering about the raw cash value, the total bilateral trade today stands at about $1.3 billion, with both sides now eyeing an ambitious target of $3 to $5 billion before the year is out. How did this happen so quickly? One key moment was the Iran-Africa Economic Cooperation Summit in April 2025, which fast-tracked numerous trade and investment agreements and essentially supercharged the new partnership. This isn't just about trade statistics. This is evidence of a strategic realignment in how Iran does business on a global scale. Chapter 2. A trade relationship reborn. Let's rewind and set the context. Iran and Africa aren't strangers. They actually share decades of cooperation, especially in sectors like agriculture, mining, and large infrastructure projects. There's always a twist in the story: sanctions. But recent years mark a dramatic comeback. Iran hit reset on its Africa strategy, determined to rebuild what was lost. Over the past 20 years, US and Western sanctions hit Iran hard, shrinking its access to global markets, including Africa. This led to a steep decline in trade activity, causing both sides to lose a valuable economic and development partner. In response, Iran launched a concentrated diplomatic push to rejuvenate relationships that had cooled off. The big turning point? The 2025 Iran-Africa Economic Cooperation Summit, where both sides reignited their ambitions and formalized a range of agreements. As part of this revival, high-level Iranian delegations' visits to Kenya, Uganda, and Zimbabwe made headlines and reinforced Tehran's intent to build trust through face-to-face diplomacy. But this time, the ambition goes beyond simply exchanging goods. Think science, technology, investment in joint ventures, and a real push for long-term, resilient partnerships. Both sides recognize the value of minimizing reliance on traditional Western-centric markets. They're writing a new script, one where shared growth, mutual development, and risk diversification are the main themes. Chapter 3. What's in the cargo? Let's break down what's filling Iranian ships headed for African ports. The cargo isn't just random, it's tightly focused on what African economies need most. The single biggest player, petrochemicals. About 70% of Iran's petrochemical output destined for export is now sent to African markets, as reported by Mer News. That's a massive number, and it tells you how central this industry is to the partnership. Next on deck, fertilizers, vital for Africa's agricultural expansion and food security strategy. Iran's strong position in fertilizer production is a direct boost for Africa's farmers and growing population. But there's more. Steel, industrial machinery, and vehicles are also critical exports, supporting Africa's construction boom and transportation networks. Why these goods? That's where Iran's export strategy gets smart. These are the building blocks for agriculture, infrastructure, and urbanization, the sectors driving Africa's growth. The alignment is no accident. It reflects deliberate planning to match Iran's industrial strengths with Africa's real economic needs and priorities. It also creates an ecosystem where both sides benefit. Africa gets affordable, high-impact inputs, and Iran secures a new booming export market. Chapter 4. The Role of Sanctions. To understand why Iran is investing so heavily in Africa, we need to talk about sanctions. Since the US withdrew from the nuclear deal in 2018, Iran has faced some of the toughest economic sanctions in recent history. These sanctions have severely limited Iran's access to international banking, insurance, shipping, and aviation sectors. It means Iran struggles to sell oil to Europe, can't use the SWIFT banking network, and faces huge barriers attracting foreign investment from its traditional partners. So, what's Iran's solution? It's simple: go where the rules aren't strictly enforced. Africa offers that escape hatch.
Iran. You know Iran, right? The country Iran that's been isolated for many years. Okay? We're going to talk about Iran today. Iran and Uganda have come together into understanding that the Western countries are trying to push their agenda to everybody else. Meaning the agenda of men marrying other. There you go. That's in Africa. In Africa, sometimes you don't have to finish the sentence. You say men marry other.
Many African countries maintain non-aligned foreign policies, trading freely with both Eastern and Western blocs. This gives Iran a valuable opening. Tehran strikes deals using barter systems and local currencies rather than dollars or euros, effectively bypassing international sanctions that choke its usual trade routes. Some transactions route through hubs like the UAE, Turkey, or Oman, while others rely on local African banks with no exposure to US sanctions. This creates an alternative trade web that shields Iran from financial isolation. In effect, sanctions have pushed Iran to build parallel trade routes away from its traditional markets, and Africa sits at the center of this new economic sphere. Instead of isolating Iran, Western sanctions have inadvertently encouraged it to deepen ties with a continent hungry for affordable goods and willing partners. This pivot is paying off. Iran's exports to Africa are booming, investments are flowing, and it's expanding its footprint where sanctions have less bite. This masterclass in adaptation shows how geopolitical pressure can reshape global trade patterns, creating new alliances and opportunities that were unimaginable just a few years ago. Chapter 5. The African Market. Let's talk about what makes Africa so attractive to a trade-hungry Iran. According to UN demographic data, the continent's demographics are unmatched anywhere else. With over 1.4 billion people and a median age under 20, Africa is projected to see its population soar past 1 billion by 2030. That means surging demand for infrastructure, energy, food, and manufactured everyday goods. But Africa isn't just enormous, it's young and urbanizing at breakneck pace. That translates into explosive growth in infrastructure projects, agriculture outputs, and consumer markets, exactly the sectors where Iran's exports have the greatest impact. Many countries, including Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya, Ghana, and Tanzania, are emerging as economic powerhouses and regional trade hubs, with demand for steel, vehicles, machinery, and fertilizers at an all-time high. Iran isn't just shipping products to these markets, it's planting roots. Tehran is investing in local production plants, trade centers, and logistics hubs inside Africa. This mirrors strategies seen from other global powers and signals that Iran is all in for the long term, not just as an exporter, but as a builder of Africa's next industrial chapter.
None of us are satisfied with the current volume of trade and the current economic exchange between countries.
To other news now, and Iranian President Ebrahim Raisi has arrived in Uganda as part of a three-country tour of Africa. Raisi recognized Kampala's recent approval of anti-gay legislation and criticized Western countries for supporting homosexuality. It's the first visit by an Iranian leader.
For Iran, Africa represents a lifeline and a laboratory, an arena to test new economic models beyond oil and a buffer against global isolation. And for Africa, it's a chance to diversify its partnerships, get competitive deals on vital imports, and accelerate economic development through new investments. Chapter 6. How Iran is making it happen. Think about this. Iran is pulling out all the stops to make its trade with Africa not just a headline, but a full-on powerhouse. First thing happening? Expanding shipping routes. Tehran isn't just sticking to the easy East Africa and North Africa routes anymore. They're pushing hard to open new lanes to West and Southwest Africa. Why? Because grabbing a slice of those markets means new customers, more trade, and bigger economic impact. Plus, it's all about cutting costs and speeding up shipments. Along with new routes, Iran is seriously investing in port modernization on the African side. Ports aren't just fancy docks. They're the beating heart of smooth trade flows. Upgrading them means less time waiting, faster customs processing, and more reliable deliveries. And here's a cool move. Iran is setting up trade centers right inside key African countries. Think Nigeria, South Africa, Algeria, where it already has embassies.
President Ibrahim Raisi just wrapped up his three-nation African visit in Zimbabwe. Raisi was met by the Zimbabwean President Emerson Mnangagwa at Harare Airport. Both countries are under U.S. sanctions, and this visit is partly aimed at building new partnerships to soften the impact of that economic punishment. Raisi has already visited Kenya and Uganda. So what is Iran looking for?
These centers act like local headquarters packed with market intelligence, business support, and storage facilities. So Iranian exporters get tailored help, and African importers get better products with fewer headaches. Iranian embassies are doing double duty, playing political and economic roles by coordinating trade delegations, smoothing out red tape, and basically playing matchmaker between businesses on both sides. They're on the ground, pushing deals and keeping business flowing. Plus, Iran's launching credit and insurance schemes to make private companies feel safer diving into African markets. This isn't just talk. There's a $2 billion joint Iran-Africa Development Fund in the works, signaling serious long-term commitment. Chapter 7. Challenging Western and Chinese Influence. Let's zoom out to Africa's geopolitical chessboard, where Iran is now playing a bold, new role. We're used to hearing about China's Belt and Road Initiative, those headline-grabbing mega projects with railways, highways, and flashy ports all over the continent. According to the World Bank, China has invested in 52 of the 54 African countries and signed BRI agreements with over 90% of them, pouring immense resources into infrastructure megadeals. Meanwhile, the EU has rolled out its Global Gateway program, which pledges $163 billion for Africa and is pushing sustainable energy, digital networks, and job creation, an attempt to move beyond old donor-recipient dynamics and foster genuine partnerships. So where does Iran fit into this high-stakes game? Iran isn't here to outspend China or match the political clout of Europe. While others go broad, Iran goes deep, offering strategic goods like petrochemicals and fertilizers that fuel Africa's core development engines. It focuses on niche sectors like petrochemicals, mining, and agriculture, where it can leverage regional expertise and, crucially, sidestep sanctions through bartering and local currency deals. This focused approach allows Iran to carve out its own space, embedding itself with production sites and trade hubs, and aiming for sticky, long-term economic bonds with African partners. For Africa, this isn't about picking sides in a global tug-of-war, but about having more suitors at the table, giving governments greater leverage, more partnership flexibility, and the freedom to negotiate the best deals for their people. Chapter 8. Can it last? Sounds promising. But let's keep it real. There are hurdles. First off, political instability. Africa is a continent on the move, but it still has its share of governance challenges and conflict hotspots that can upend trade deals overnight. What happens if a key country suddenly closes its borders or has a surge of unrest? Iranian investments could be exposed and supply chains broken in an instant. On the financial side, many African banking systems aren't quite ready for complex cross-border trade. Payments are slow, infrastructure is uneven, and there's always an element of risk with currency volatility. Iran's use of barter deals and non-dollar currencies is clever, but these aren't miracle cures. There's no guarantee that this workaround will remain smooth, especially as volumes rise or if enforcement of financial sanctions tightens. Iran still represents just a sliver of Africa's total trade. Making the jump from promising upstart to real powerhouse will demand careful navigation, trust building, and constant adaptation to shifting geopolitical winds. The risk that global or regional powers might seek to sabotage or counter Iran's ascent is always there, lurking in the background.
Really stands to be gained through these growing ties between Tehran and Africa. Well, joining me now to debate that are...
Well, the Iranian trade figures with Africa are small, about $2 billion a year. And so Tehran is basically looking at new markets. It's very constrained by US and EU sanctions. And so 54, 55 African countries is something that's a priority for Tehran and so that's what this recent trip.
Chapter 9. What this means for the world. So why does all this matter beyond headlines and quarterly trade stats? Iran's growing Africa play is about much more than finding new buyers for petrochemicals. It's shaking up the old order. As Iran thickens its ties and proves resilient under pressure, it shows the world how creative strategy can crack even the toughest sanctions. For African countries, this means new choices, more options for funding, investment, and technology, and less need to rely exclusively on former colonial powers or mega players like China and the EU. This isn't just about one country's comeback story. It's a hint at what the next era of global commerce could look like, less dominated by any one power, more flexible, more competitive. Africa becomes the playing field and the prize in a multipolar economy where nimble actors like Iran help redraw the map of influence and opportunity. Iran's Africa strategy isn't just a trade story, it's a blueprint for resilience in a divided world. Will others follow suit? Got thoughts on Iran's rising role in Africa? Or how could this reshape global trade? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to more international news, economic shifts, and untold global stories. Thanks for watching.